So thank you so much, everybody, for coming out tonight. I'm Alex Kithes. As all of you know, I'm running for Woonsocket City Council in the special election this summer. I was born and raised in the city. I'm the son of working-class Greek immigrants. My parents and grandfather are all here. And that upbringing is what taught me what it means to work hard and to work together with your community and the people you love to create positive change. I went through the Woonsocket public school system and got a really good education. And then in 11th grade, in 2009, the city discovered a multi-million-dollar budget shortfall and started slashing education funding. And so my first political involvement was standing arm in arm with the teachers in this city, fighting against budget cuts that would have decimated the education department. Fighting against cuts to after-school programs and to AP classes and to the teachers' contracts, things that are still being fought today despite some of those early wins. And so it was a huge honor for me to get the Woonsocket Teachers Guild endorsement so early on in this process. And it meant a lot considering that history that I have with them. So right now I want to share my vision of a city of the future. So imagine the year is 2028. You wake up bright and early and watch the sun rise as you savor that first cup of strong morning coffee. The kids get up a little later and they help you prepare breakfast together. You scramble some of your chicken's eggs, prepare some vegetables and fruit from your garden, and some other ingredients bought at the farmer's market, one of the many that are in Woonsocket. You get your kids ready for school while you and your husband get ready for work. They normally take the bus, but today you decide you're going to drive them. And you load everyone into your electric car. On their way to elementary school, you see more than 20 solar arrays on houses throughout the city. Those gleaming panels are similar to the ones on your house, the ones that powered the car you're driving and that make your electricity bill almost zero. And they're also similar to the huge array on your kid's school and on City Hall and on so many other buildings in the city. All of which were put up during the economic boom of the last decade, where the city started looking towards the future and working collaboratively with unionized renewable energy companies to democratize our electric grid and move away from fossil fuel energy production altogether. And a lot has changed in the last decade of our city's history. As you pull up to the school, one of the highest performing elementary schools in the state, you're greeted by your oldest child's 4th grade teacher, who also happens to be one of the group of 8 or 10 of your neighbors that get together regularly and barbecue or get dinner at one of the city's top-rated restaurants. The last 10 years has been really good to Woonsocket schools. The teachers haven't gone without a contract in over a decade, since mid-2019, and together with the city's renewed commitment to appropriately funding public education and lobbying the state in solidarity with Pawtucket and Central Falls and other post-industrial cities in our state, they have achieved a much fairer state funding formula that meant that your kids, as proud citizens of Woonsocket, were afforded the same opportunities as students in Barrington or Warren. And education isn't the only thing that's improved over the last decade. After you drop your husband off at his job at one of Woonsocket's greatest restaurants, where he waits tables and bartends, you drive a little up the road and park in the lot at NRI Power. You were one of the first union engineers that was hired at this startup, which was formed just 2 years ago to manage the decentralized microgrids that were popping up across northern Rhode Island. Woonsocket was a natural first pick to locate this new business, with their vibrant Main Street and reputation of being forward-thinking in their approach to energy and small businesses. The stink of sewage is gone and replaced with the sound of construction as new businesses sprout up in this solar-powered collective community. Your workday goes by pretty quickly. Before you know it, it's lunchtime, and you decide to grab something quick from one of the many food trucks lined up along Main Street, and then take a quick swim in the Blackstone River. The early November weather is warmer than it was while you were growing up, one of the many effects of global climate change that the scientists warned would be imminent even in the best possible scenario. But it could have been so much worse. If Woonsocket hadn't worked together with cities and towns across the country, with cities and towns around the world, and together with the state governments and the federal government to reduce carbon emissions down to less than 10% of the 2019 levels, spur the growth of green jobs, and create an economy that worked for the 99%, a 70-degree day in November would be the least of your worries. And thankfully, your local environment is pretty resilient. As you dip your head under the water, you remember how happy you were when the city decided to collaborate with all of the local environmental nonprofits and finally finish the work of cleaning up the Blackstone River and protecting and expanding Woonsocket's green spaces, which maintain the local biodiversity and shelter the city from some of the worst effects of climate change. You and your family go for a swim or a tube down the river at least once a week. And it's always fun to float by all of the new local restaurants that have opened up the second that the river was finally clean. You work hard for the rest of the day, and you rush to pick up your husband and kids. You're all incredibly excited for the plans you have tonight. Your family is meeting some of your best friends for dinner at one of the local restaurants, and then going to the city's biggest art show of the year. It's always held at one of the local galleries along Main Street and in the greater downtown area, and features pieces from 25 or 30 local artists. No one would have ever guessed a decade ago that local art would become one of the city's fastest growing economic drivers, and that Woonsocket would become the arts capital of the state. Yeah. The night flies by, and by the end of it, you arrive home full of good food, a warm glow, and 3 new paintings you can't wait to put up in your kids' rooms tomorrow. After they go to bed, you and your husband discuss your plans for the day off. Did I forget to mention? Tomorrow's election day. And it's an important one, with every office from Woonsocket City Council all the way up to the President of the United States on the ballot. You'll never forget as a kid how your parents would always talk about having to choose the lesser of 2 evils in every election. God, how things have changed. As more young people got elected into government, they insisted on election and campaign finance reform, working hard to get big money influence out of politics, reduce the stronghold of corruption in both major parties and in the government as a whole, and making it so that even a waiter working 2 jobs to support their family could run for office and win. And that's when everything started to change. So, all of this probably sounds like a fantasy, right? But it doesn't have to be. We're living at a pretty bad moment in human history, in our city's history, in our state's and country's history. There are mounting problems that the next generations, who am I kidding? The current generations, my generation, are going to have to inherit. The existential threats of climate change and the rise of global fascism, the unbelievable level of corruption, big money influence, and entrenched good old boy politics on every level of government. Constant abuses of power that put the most disadvantaged Americans, the most disadvantaged people around the world, at threat every day. And here at home in Woonsocket, an economic crisis and a cultural depression so severe that most people would never hear that vision I just described and view it as achievable. The livability of our future is under threat. The future that young people will inherit looks pretty bad right now. But at this point in Woonsocket's history, there's still hope. The economy of the last century has crumbled. It's gone. So the only thing we can do is start looking forward. Start designing the city that we want 5 and 10 and 20 years in the future. And that's why I'm running for this seat. I'm 26-year-old, I'm an activist and an organizer with proven successes in fighting for good government reform, serious climate action, and public educational opportunities. I believe that the only solution to Woonsocket's problems is bold, forward-thinking leadership that's willing to fight for a vibrant and livable future. The city needs to focus on sustainability-oriented, short and long-term economic development. That means addressing our budget crisis head-on, working against the problems that come with establishment politics, enthusiastically investing in public education and public school teachers, working to decarbonize our energy and address the climate crisis here at home by helping renewable energy companies create projects in the city and growing our tax base as a result. Reduce the red tape that makes it hard for this city to become an arts haven. Compassionately address homelessness and the opioid crisis. And work as hard as possible to expand the tax base, revitalizing our Main Street and local economy so that people can one day stop talking about what Woonsocket once was and start talking about what Woonsocket has become. fix this. We have no choice. And I'll leave you with a quote from one of my favorite political leaders. Our history is written, but our future is not. We have every opportunity in the world to change it. So let's begin by working together, not as members of factions who fight over their vision of the city's past, but as citizens of Woonsocket with bold imaginations and new visions for the future of our city. Thank you.